He spent 16 years in the Minnesota Vikings front office, 10 as the general manager, and in that time they made the playoffs 6 times and won the division 4 times. Rick Spielman now joining us live. Spent some time in Kansas City during the draft. So we talked about the Green Bay Packers signed a contract today. It's a very safe contract. Green Bay could move off Jordan Love in a year. And then, Rick, I've always said I think quarterbacks come in 3 groups. The first group is small. It's we're not taking any calls. That's Mahomes, Herbert, Allen. The second group is we like our guy, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, but we take a call.
Right.
The third group is we're calling people. We got a mess on our hands. My guess is Jordan Love's not 1 or 3. Do you think there's a possibility? I watched that contract today. Green Bay acts like they don't know. If you've had a guy in camp for 3 years, if you're signing that contract, am I wrong to say they have real concerns about whether he's the guy or not in Green Bay?
I think they want to see the results because they've never seen him as a full season starter if he can stay healthy. I think it's a different scenario than what we saw with Daniel Jones with the New York Giants last year. But they did a great job, I thought, building around him, giving him some young stars to grow with. But I think they want to see the results. But the difference between Green Bay's situation and New York's, that was a whole new regime coming in. So they didn't know Daniel Jones. But you think they would have some kind of idea of what they have in Jordan Love. But I also think they definitely want him to prove it as he goes forward as well.
As a general manager, and you look at Baltimore's deal with Lamar, which is about 75% guaranteed, do you think that's sort of the future going in for quarterbacks? 75 guaranteed, 25 not?
Well, I think once they got the Jalen Hurts deal done, then that expedited the process for Lamar Jackson. I don't know where it's going to go because you got Herbert coming up, you got Burrow coming up. So are those guys going to try to get the fully guaranteed contracts? Our situation in Minnesota with Kirk Cousins was different because we weren't trading for him. He was actually on the open market, and we verified that there were more than just us going to guarantee a fully guaranteed contract, but it was for a short-term deal. But now when you're looking at Lamar's situation, which he held out for, didn't get, but with the other these quarterbacks going forward, I still think that Deshaun Watson will be an anomaly, and I don't think anyone will go down that road. And maybe the only reason that Deshaun ended up in Cleveland, because it sounded at the time like they were, not the top choice of his to go to in a trade, that the only way they can get him to go there was to fully guarantee a contract.
Yeah, that's right. Timing, leverage, how badly does somebody want you, all play into this. So when Aaron goes to the Jets, when you brought in Kirk Cousins, it's a new player, it's a new personality. You need coordinators that work with him. So here's the Jets with a defensive head coach, a young offensive line, young skill people. They bring in Hackett, which I don't think is a bad move at all. But when you look at that, when you go back to Kirk Cousins' first year, is it bumpier than people think? Because every quarterback's got their own liabilities, strengths, personality. They gobble up some of your salary, right? So, how do you think? Yeah, I mean, look at the Aaron to the Jets thing. Your thoughts going forward?
I think it'll be a smoother transaction, even when you look back at just when Brett Favre went there. But with Hackett there as the offensive coordinator, I think that was critical for Aaron Rodgers wanting to go there because he kept referring to Coach Hackett as well and being a major part of that process. So you already have an offensive coordinator that has worked with his Hall of Fame quarterback that knows what he is good at, what he isn't good at, the type of system you want to put in place. The quarterback's coming in very familiar with the system as well. So that makes it, in my opinion, a lot smoother transaction than just taking him from one offensive scheme, putting him in a whole different one that he's never ran. And he's run this scheme since the last 19, 20 years.
Yeah.
So this will be, in my opinion, a lot smoother transaction than, maybe a Deshaun Watson going to Cleveland or even when Kirk originally came to us.
Tell me, when you look at Philadelphia doing the Georgia thing, your thoughts on that. Is that something as a GM, you go look for one guy, and then all of a sudden on the roster you see 2 or 3 guys you like?
Well, if Jalen Carter was playing at USC or somewhere else, that wouldn't have, they still would have taken him. It doesn't matter where he was. I think it's a little bit, and I thought, just sitting there and watching Howie Roseman and how Philadelphia kept this roster very competitive, where I think it's going to be in the Super Bowl again next year. They weren't able to keep all the players. They knew that, but they kept the core guys that were the culture of that locker room, the Coxes of the world, the Grahams of the world, Kelseys of the world. Those guys set the tone and what that whole culture is about. And now Jalen Hurts, because of the big contract that he got. But when you go to get a Jalen Carter, I think it's a little bit ironic that it's Georgia. But look at all the Bulldogs they drafted last year: Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle. So when you're taking a guy with maybe some questionable character or some red flags, you're bringing him into a situation where you have a strong culture, strong veteran leadership, guys that he has played with, which will make it an easier transition for him. And he's going in to fit into that culture. And I'm sure Howie and that whole staff went through everything they had to make sure they were comfortable taking him. But I think with the culture they have in place, with some of his teammates there who know him, because if I was in a general manager's shoes, I would go down and talk to our players that have played with this guy, hoping that I would get a correct response or an honest response. Yeah, bring this guy here. We have him. We'll make sure he's taken care of. And then you're going to get a perennial Pro Bowler, in my opinion.
The website's called the 33rd Team. Mike Tannenbaum, Rick Spielman works for it, the former Viking GM for a decade. I felt, and many did, that Bryce Young was the most agile, game-ready, smoothest, self-aware, accurate quarterback available, but he's tiny. Sean Payton came on my show and said, when you get into the top 10 to 15 picks, draft prototype. Don't take a risk on size. How did you feel about Carolina going with a 5'10.5" quarterback that probably will play at maybe less than 195 pounds? How did that feel for you?
Let's just say he's 204 when he weighed at the combine. That's his official weight, and I'm going to go with that. So I want to get one box checked at least. But you look at him, and I had an opportunity to see him play live twice this year. I had an opportunity to actually sit down with the kid in the fall when I was down there at Alabama. And I have never came across a kid that is able to handle everything that comes his way, whether it's the Heisman Trophy, whether it's the Dr. Pepper commercials. And every time he was put on a big stage, whether it was a national championship game or even down at the Sugar Bowl, I was down at the Sugar Bowl covering the Sugar Bowl. And he didn't have to play in that game, but he played in that game. And after about the first series or two, may have had his best game of the season. But he has so many unique traits that I think he is the exception to the rule, and that this was by far the best quarterback, not only on the field, but all the boxes that you're trying to check off the field. And the kid is just a phenomenal kid. Some people may think he is quiet when you sit there and interview him, but when I saw the Alabama players just gravitate towards that leadership, he just has that it factor about him. And anytime the game was on the line, I had no question that kid was going to come through for Alabama.
Finally, Kirk Cousins, entering the final year in his current deal. He is more than capable. But you start looking around at the top quarterbacks in the league. He doesn't give you a lot off script. His arm is good. It's not special. Your hunch on what the Vikings do?
Well, I think they sent the message that, that he's going into the final year of his deal. I don't know how they felt about any of these quarterbacks this year, if there was going to be an heir apparent. But they are planning, in my opinion, to move on from Kirk Cousins, or else they would extend him. But you got to understand, he's 35 years old. No question about what he was able to accomplish for them last year. I think he set a record, which everybody had criticized about him, about coming back from behind or playing in big games. He didn't play well, and their defense didn't play well either in that playoff game when they got beat pretty badly by the New York Giants. But what he was able to do during the season shows you that he can still play at a high level. But he's getting long in the tooth, as we like to say in the scouting world. So I'm sure they have a plan in place on how they're going to move forward.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.